Haseong Kim goes to the Tampa Bay Rays in one of the most surprising deals of the offseason. Royals make a big addition to their bullpen, bringing in Carlos Estevez, and Max Scherzer may be getting closer to signing with the team, the Toronto Blue Jays. That and much more ahead here at the Upside. And welcome into the MLB Hot Stove Daily. My name is Michael. Appreciate you guys joining us late on a Wednesday evening. Hopefully you guys had a lot of fun today because there was a ton of transactions to get into and a lot more rumors as well. So we'll dig right in. We'll start with the biggest contract of the day. Haseong Kim goes for 2 years, $29-ish million to the Tampa Bay Rays. Tell me if you had that one on your bingo card. Now, the signing itself is a good insurance policy as they're hoping some of these young players coming up from the minors will ultimately solidify the needs that they have. In case they need some professional at-bats at that time, Haseong Kim will be there to take those at-bats and at least give them a solid floor from which to work. Junior Caminero is having a great winter league. I think he's going to be just fine adjusting to the major league level. However, you still want to get in some veterans there that at least know how to win and at least know how to perform at the major league level. I think that's what this move is really about. And the deal comes with an opt-out after the first year for Kim if he wants to take another bite at the apple next year. So overall, Rays were known to be needing to spend money to avoid having a grievance filed against them by the MLBPA. This is their way of adding to this team without taking on somebody else's garbage. And ultimately, it's going to be a useful piece for them. They have been known to utilize multiple utility-type players in their team over the years. Remember the original, Ben Zobrist and all those other players that came from that Tampa Bay Rays system, the platooning, all that. That started with the Tampa Bay Rays. So kind of keep that in mind here. Kim kind of fits the mold of the players that they usually target, both in their minor league system as far as tools that they really like and see if they can develop them, and then also in their free agent targets as well. So the contract, though, is a little bit surprising just from the sheer money of it. I mean, sure, they were in there for Freddie Freeman. According to reports that we saw, they were at 6 for 150. Incredible numbers, but obviously they didn't get that one done. But still, in free agency, it's rare to see them spend at the upper levels of free agency. And don't get this confused with Juan Soto. It's not that type of a money. But for the Rays, this is still a big contract for them. So let us know in the comments there what you guys think. Hit that heart in the chat if you're happy for the Rays finally getting a little dipping their toe into the free agent waters here with Haseong Kim. The second big deal that we saw is Carlos Estevez decides that he wants to go to the Kansas City Royals. I didn't have this one on my bingo card either. I knew the Royals were looking to upgrade that bullpen. I did not think they would be able to pry away Carlos Estevez. I thought for sure he'd be going to one of the Cubs, the Reds, or the Tigers. After the Cubs made their decision on Presley, I thought, well, maybe you can cross out the Cubs a little bit. But still a surprise to see the Royals get this one done. And honestly, I love what they've done each of the past two off seasons. Last year, the second highest spending team in all of free agency was the Kansas City Royals. This year, they make the trade for Jonathan India, and now they bring in Carlos Estevez. Love this top and bottom here for the Kansas City Royals. We'll see how good they are going into the new year. Welcome in Holly, Mark, Rafe, Master Vinman. Appreciate you all joining us today. Huge W for the Royals. Kind of my thoughts there as well. If they had just done the Jonathan India stuff, I'd have been happy with what they had already done last year, kind of building on it this year with Jonathan India. I think the template is there for the Royals. Look back to the teams that made the push to the World Series. That's the formula that they're trying to do right now. Trying to get some speed on the base pass, contact, good defense, all those kinds of things, what Jonathan India is going to help out with here. I still think they could use another bat in their lineup, but we'll see if they add one at the deadline. And the offseason's not done yet. There's still a few bats still out there. But the Royals have done a nice job kind of reconstructing this roster and in what looked like a team that would eventually have to trade Bobby Witt because they weren't going to be a team in contention for years to come. They've certainly changed course rather quickly here over just the last 2 years. And boy, oh boy, do they have a special talent there in Bobby Witt as well. Let's see here. Also, thoughts on the Mets and Braves, talking to San Diego about King and Cease. Um, I'll put it this way: the Padres are going to have their toes in a lot of different pies right now. I mean, I'm sure they're going to be discussing Rise, King, and Cease with just about anybody who or anybody who's looking for some starting pitching, or anybody who needs a bat. By the way, that's every team in the league. Now, as far as the Mets and Braves specifically, what could this mean for them? Look at the Braves. They don't have a lot of money that they can spend right now. So if they can find a way to do a trade, equal money for equal money type of a trade, maybe they do something there. But I find it highly unlikely that they would bring in one of those guys without sending some salary going out the other way. Now, while they still are looking for another starter at the back end of that rotation, while they're still looking for some bullpen help as well, I don't necessarily think they have the money to really bring in a King or a Cease. Maybe they'd be able to get a deal done with King as far as a trade, but there'd have to be some salary going out the other way. I just don't see them having the trade wherewithal or the trade prospects to be able to get a Cease trade done there. But as far as the Mets, they're looking for a number one. As far as I'm concerned, I'm looking for a number one for them. I'm sure they have had those discussions internally as well, that the one spot that they may have a deficiency at once they get to the trade deadline is still going to be in that starting rotation. So if they have a chance to add a number one, they have to look at it. Now, King, I don't necessarily think fits the mold of a number one. I think he's a very good pitcher. I think at best he's a number two in somebody's rotation. I think on a regular, everyday basis, he's probably a number three. I don't trust him as a number one leading of the rotation yet. Now, maybe he has a great year in the final year of free agent, or before he hits free agency. Might change my opinion of him, but right now, I don't think you can view him that way if you're trading for him. Now, Dylan Cease, on the other hand, has been able to prove himself as the frontline starter for a team before. Now, understandably, he's had a little bit of variance in his performance, but he's also reached those upper echelon levels of great performance as well. So you're banking on him having that repeatable performance again. And while it's a risk because he hasn't been able to do it, consistently enough for my liking, he still has the talent to be a number one. So teams looking for starting pitching here. Orioles, I think, should be kicking the tires on this one. I'm sure they are. I would prefer them to go with more of a long-term solution there. Mets, on the other hand, they have Steve Cohen behind them. So the only time they've ever really paused when it comes to free agent spending, Carlos Correa due to the medical issues, and now with Pete Alonso, again, defensive issues at first base. How long of a contract do they want to give him? Dylan Cease, starting pitching, on the other hand, I think they'd be more than willing to spend in free agency. I think they're just biding their time to find the right guy to give that money to. Corbin Burns, the thought this offseason was, hey, if they're, think Corbin Burns is an ace ready to be at the front of that rotation, maybe they'll go out there and give him the money. It sounds like the Mets didn't really think of him in that regard for years to come, so that's why they didn't really pursue that option as much as we might have thought coming into the offseason. But to your comment here about the Mets looking after Cease and King, not a surprise here because they still need a number one in the front of that rotation. I think more likely that will happen around the trade deadline. Mark, yes, I did see that about the crash as well. Just, really sad news there. Hopefully, best wishes to all those involved, and thoughts and prayers with the families of those affected. But tough situation there. I don't want to get into too much of it, but it's literally everywhere on the news right now, so I'm sure you guys have already seen it. If you haven't already, just flip on the TV. I'm sure you can. Rafe, also Kim to the Rays was not some I saw coming, but a really good move. I agree there, Rafe. Master Vinman, welcome in. Hank, no matter what, there's always an upside, Sports Network. Thank you, Hank. Appreciate you joining us once again. David, what do you think about the story behind why Freddie Freeman left the Braves? Apparently he told Acuna to wear shoes for road. As my screen jumps there. Wear shoes for road games and he didn't take it well. I'll put it this way. If the money had been equal, I think he would have stayed a member of the Atlanta Braves. Even with any type of, personal grievances he may have had against other players. I think he wanted to stay in Atlanta. I think when LA became a viable option and was willing to put the money where their mouth was, and Atlanta really wasn't, they were sticking to their guns and they wanted to get that long-term deal done at their number. And you can hardly argue with the Braves at this point. They got a good option via trade in Matt Olson there as well. I'd say that contract has worked out quite well. But I think, if we're all being honest with each other, Freddie Freeman's the best first baseman out of the two, and I don't think it's particularly close. I think Atlanta probably would have been able to win another World Series by this point if they had kept Freddie Freeman, but you also have to wonder financially, What would they have not have been able to do because of bringing back Freddie Freeman versus going the Matt Olson route? So maybe they don't get a long-term extension done with Michael Harris. Maybe that's not such a bad thing after you've seen how his career's turned out the last couple of years. But be an interesting kind of revisionist history for me. But I'll just put it this way: Freddie Freeman has a great career, great Atlanta Brave, has had a great career with the Los Angeles Dodgers as well. Had his Kirk Gibson moment in the World Series last year. He's good for baseball, top to bottom. He's just great at everything he does. Very good person off the field as well. So hopefully he recovers from his surgery that he had in the offseason, and we'll be looking forward to seeing what he has to provide the Dodgers and Major League Baseball fans with in 25. Evening, Cowboys Nation. Welcome in. Sarcastic, welcome back. Sean, appreciate you joining us once again. KC needs Billy Butler back. I don't know about that one. David Lawrence, tell the Mets take Stroman from us. I don't think that's happening. I think the only way Stroman moves off that Yankees team is if they attach a piece to it. And ultimately, they're going to have to convince a team like the Marlins or a team that's just trying to make payroll at this point to take on that salary. I think Stroman, if he is able to pitch every fifth day in that starting rotation for somebody, maybe he can recoup some of his value there and then trade him at the deadline and see if you get even more value. But I don't think the Yankees are looking to hold on to him right now. I think they're looking to move on from him because they want to have some flexibility going into the trade deadline this year, where they're still going to be looking for an impact bat at that point as well. Bregman update. Good question there, Sean. Let's go ahead and give the Alex Bregman update of the day. The Houston Astros are still sticking to their guns. 6 years for 156. They're not budging, and the only way he's going to go back to Houston is on that contract there. Now, as far as the other teams involved, Red Sox, we talked about the Abraham Toro deal, minor league deal with the Red Sox yesterday, kind of signaling the mindset there with the Red Sox. I wouldn't say the Red Sox are completely out on him. I think the door remains open to him signing there, but I would think it's very unlikely at this point. That leaves you with just a few teams. We're looking at the Chicago Cubs, who certainly could be considered the front runner as well. Toronto Blue Jays are certainly in this conversation. And then I would also mention the Los Angeles Angels. Angels are said to be looking to make a big splash. I don't think they're necessarily a fit for Bregman. I don't think competitively that's where he wants to go. I think you'd pick one of the other three teams, even going back on a team-friendly deal with the Houston Astros before he would sign a far more lucrative deal with a team like, say, the Los Angeles Angels. But in either event, I think this one still comes down to the Cubs and Blue Jays. We'll go ahead and talk about Max Scherzer here, kind of a line item number one here. The Toronto Blue Jays seem to be one of the favorites now. They're pushing hard to get a deal done with Max Scherzer. After having his showcase the other day, he had 8 teams in attendance, and all 8 teams were very interested in how he performed. Tells you he still has it, and I think he's going to do very well on his contract. I think we're looking at Justin Verlander's deal of 1 year, $15 million as a very comparable deal. I think Scherzer has a little bit more left in the tank, so if I were a GM of a team, while Verlander's 1 year, 15 to me was a little bit of a stretch, you have to get it done. You have to respect the Hall of Fame career, all that kind of a thing. You're not going to sign him for 1 year, 4. But 1 year, 15 for Verlander, if that's what his market value is, I would say Scherzer has a little bit left in the tank, a little bit more than Verlander. So if I were signing him, I'd say his worth on a team probably be in the neighborhood of $18 to $15 million. But we'll see where he goes. But Toronto is now considered the favorite to sign him. Remember, they're trying to get the Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s contract signed to an extension, and we'll see if they get that done. That's going to be the whole story for the Blue Jays this offseason. Can they get Vlad extended? If they can't, this whole season is going to be about, hey, Vlad, how does this recent winning streak affect your decision to stay with Toronto? Hey, Vlad, how does this recent losing streak affect your stance on staying in Toronto? Hey, Vlad, I noticed you're in a bit of a slump this week. Does this affect how you're going to stay in Toronto or if you're going to go somewhere else? Hey, Vlad, how do you like your clubhouse? Hey, Vlad, do you like your manager? Hey, Vlad, do you look at all these other teams as you go around to the rest of the league? Are you taking note of the ballpark? All those other kinds of things? Those are the headlines we're going to see around Vladimir Guerrero Jr. if they don't get that extension done. And that's nothing but a headache for the Blue Jays that they're going to have to deal with. And oh, by the way, these are questions not just to Vladimir Guerrero Jr., but they're also going to be to the rest of that clubhouse there as well. Hey, Dalton Varsho, I know Vlady is a free agent at the end of the year. What are you doing specifically to try to convince him to stay there in Toronto? Hey, Jose Barrios, what are you doing to try to convince Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to stay with the Toronto Blue Jays? Hey, manager, what do you think you're going to be able to do if this team doesn't get into the playoffs? Do you think you'll even be around for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. if he decides to stay for the next season? Hey, front office, what contract did you ultimately offer him? Was it enough? Was it too much? Do you think he'll sign for more in free agency? What kind of contract length do you think it's going to have? Look at how many questions I just posed in what, a minute and a half? And that's just off the top of my head. I'm not exactly a seasoned reporter like Ken Rosenthal or John Paul Morosi or any of these other guys that that make really good questions in those press conferences there, or let alone the beat writers that don't necessarily have the filter that the national media does. There are going to be some hard questions to answer there in Toronto if they don't get that extension done. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be traded. I'm not saying he's going to leave in free agency. I'm not even saying he's going to sign that extension. All I'm going to say is it's such a big thing for Toronto that this entire team is going to have it be the focal point of that whole entire season if they don't get that extension done. Even if they bring in Anthony Santander, Max Scherzer, Jack Flaherty, Pete Alonso, the questions will still remain. How do all these signings affect your decision about whether or not to sign the extension? What does this mean about do you demand a trade before the deadline? Do you think you even want to sign here in free agency? Why didn't you sign the extension? Do you not like it here in Toronto? Those are some questions that Toronto is going to have to answer if they don't get that extension done. That's why this whole offseason is about whether or not they get that extension done, not whether or not they bring in Anthony Santander or if they bring in Jack Flaherty. Now, if those moves help you convince Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to sign long term, by all means, go out there and do it. I get it. You still have to run a baseball team. But at a certain point, you have to realize your position in the league right now. Your entire team right now rests, the future of it rests on Vladimir Guerrero Jr. shoulders. If he decides to leave, what exactly does this team really look like in 26? I would say it looks like a team at best looking like a retool, at worst going into a very lengthy rebuild process. Not a place you want to be if you're an outside free agent looking to sign with Toronto, no matter how much money they have on the table. All right, let's go ahead and kind of go through the rest of the comments here and catch up with a few of these. Rafe, King seems more like a Brave than Cease, but neither feel like Mets. I kind of agree with you on both of those, but I do think Cease would help upgrade that rotation just a little bit. I wouldn't say that they are necessarily all the way in or all the way out on either of those two starting pitchers, but for the Braves, I would say King is more like their more cost-effective guy for them. But that's the only reason why he feels a little bit more like a Brave there. Cowboys Nation, King feels like he'd be a fan of Camden. Maybe, but to me, I think they should be aiming a little bit higher with their trade targets. I mentioned this last night anyway. I would rather go for the controllable guys, Sandy Alcantara, Pablo Lopez, or some other guys that we may not know about at the trade deadline. That would be the route I would be going if I'm Baltimore. However, if I said, hey, I don't want to trade any more prospects, I'd rather stick with what's out there on the free agent market, then I guess you're left with, Jack Flaherty, Max Scherzer, Andrew Heaney, Nick Pivetta, that level of starting pitcher. None of those guys, to me, are number ones in that Orioles rotation, but we'll see which direction they decide to go. Let's see here. It may seem Cowboys Nation feels more like the Yankees. That wouldn't happen. You can see last season King started to figure it out. I really think he's going to be that guy in a couple of years without injury setbacks, of course. I could see that, but he's not there yet is my only problem. And he's going to be hitting free agency after this year. So if he's going to sign a contract and you're hoping that he becomes a number one, how much money are you willing to bet on the fact that he may or may not reach that potential? That's a big risk. Now, when you sign guys in free agency, you're counting on what they will do for you in the future. So that does help your case. You also pay for a little bit of what's on the back of the baseball card, and none of that is of ace quality. So while he's a good pitcher, he's still a number 3 in my opinion, at best a number 2, and has never shown the ability to be a number 1. Now, he might still rise and continue to grow as he gets more experience starting. He's only started for the last couple of years or so, and at the big league level, and if you're the Orioles and you're looking for somebody you can really grow with, have a low-cost starting pitcher that might have ace-level potential, maybe he's your guy in free agency after the season, but we shall see. Let's see here. Master Vinman, if the Cubs make a trade for King, it would seem that the Cubs are in positioning themselves for 25 and not beyond. Is it smart to take on too many players in the final year? Good question there, Master Vinman. That's kind of been my problem with the Cubs this entire time, is that they're shooting for 2025. They say they're all in on 2025, but what about 26, 27, and 28? Is the front office on more of a hot stove, if you will, than the Toronto Blue Jays front office? I think that's one of the quiet issues that we're not paying enough attention to as baseball fans, is where this team is ultimately headed. Kyle Tucker, free agent at the end of the year. If he leaves for nothing in free agency, That trade was a horrible mistake for the Cubs franchise going forward. And does anybody think that the trade alone for Kyle Tucker was enough to push them over the top to win the division, let alone make a run in the postseason, let alone make it to the World Series and possibly win it? I don't think any of us, even Cubs fans, are delusional enough to think that of just the Kyle Tucker trade. Now, they bring in Ryan Presley. That does help. They bring in Colin Ray to help out that rotation. That helps to an even lesser degree. But to me, this is still spinning the tires from where the Cubs were a year ago. To me, the offense has a higher end piece in Kyle Tucker, but I wouldn't say the offense is better with the subtractions of Paredes and Bellinger. They bring in Colin Ray to help out the starting rotation, but that bullpen I think is the one spot they've really improved on this roster. But overall, I'd give them a mix. I'd give them kind of a C plus, B minus grade for the offseason. To me, they still need to add another bat. They're limited financially with what they want to bring in. If they bring in Bregman, obviously that offense would be better than what it was last year, at least in my opinion. I think Tucker, Bregman are better than Paredes and Bellinger. I think that's the trade-off you're making there. But the bigger question is, what kind of contract would they be able to sign Bregman to and hold on to him long term? And two, would they be able to commit Kyle Tucker to sign an extension or sign him in free agency? So those are all big questions for the Chicago Cubs. And again, as to your comment here, Mr. Vinman, as far as getting guys in the final year of their deal, you mentioned King from the Padres. I understand they are still looking for some starting pitching in free agency. We've been gone over this a few times. They've talked about Flaherty, Scherzer. They've even mentioned a few other starters as well. Andrew Heaney's been one of the names that's been connected there. I would rather go that route than trade for Michael King because, again, you're mortgaging more of the future because, again, Kyle Tucker's a free agent at the end of the year. So if things don't work out, you lose King in free agency, you lose Tucker in free agency. What are you left with going into 26 and with your prospects going forward? Now, understandably, the Cubs have a decent prospect pool with which to work with right now. Maybe they want to cash in a little bit of that. So if you're willing to do so, are you willing to do it for another one-year contract and maybe they leave in free agency? Or would you rather bring in somebody with control? The same argument I made with the Baltimore Orioles. They've gone the short-term contract route with Jack Flaherty and with the trade anyway, with 1 year left on their deal with Flaherty and Burns. And now if they do it with Cease, that'll be 3 straight years they would have done that. Is it a better, more prudent move to go with a long-term contract than a lot of these 1 year guys that are left or have 1 year left on their contract before free agency? Understandably, their value in trade is a lot less, so they're a lot easier to acquire. I get that. And all it takes is just getting them to sign on the dotted line in free agency. But all it takes for them to leave in free agency is for them to sign with any of the other 29 other teams in baseball on that same dotted line. So high risk, high reward to do something like that. But the Cubs, as they say, are all in on 2025, and they're a team to watch out for in the first half of the season. Because if it's going well, I would expect them to go full bore and try to add more at the deadline. If it's not going well, we could see them go through the trade deadline, possibly trade off Kyle Tucker, and then before we even get to the end of the season, we might have a changing of guard in the front office. And Craig Counsell, for all the the hoopla that it got from moving from the Brewers to the Cubs, he may very well be on the way out the door if this thing does not get turned around this year. Sounds like the ownership there is a little bit antsy to get back in the winning side of things. He has his comments about how fans are viewing his spending. He wants to be viewed as a winner once again. And I think getting back to the postseason is going to take a lot of heat off of his spending habits. And we'll have to see if they're able to retain Kyle Tucker after the season. But again, this is a team I want you guys to pay very close attention to as we go through the season. Try to catch up on a few of these comments here, so I apologize if I do miss a few of these. Let's see, that's why I'm here. Welcome in VPCZX. Appreciate you joining us once again. I did see you comment on one of our videos that we had posted yesterday. I noticed our viewership was going up on those today. I really do appreciate those of you who have decided to join us here at the Upside. Hit that like and subscribe and join us at our channel. Can you convince Toronto to sign Bregman so I don't have to see him wear an Astros jersey again? I don't necessarily mind Bregman in an Astros jersey, even as a Rangers fan. I think he has, his good points and bad points. I don't necessarily, worry about him being in that lineup as a Rangers fan. I just hope my team comes out on top. VPCZX, yeah, I can try the Rogers Communication will listen. Alrighty, welcome in Donnie. Appreciate you joining us. Hal really pissed you off? Okay. Hal was saying that he will be cheap for a long time. I don't know about cheap. I would just say that the Yankees are still spending very well in the game. Are they spending at, say, the level of the Dodgers? No. Is any other team spending at the level of the Dodgers? No. But they are certainly in the upper echelon of team spending. Now, are they spending on Juan Soto? Are they spending on some of the guys that you might like? Probably not. I still think they're a better team than where they were last year as far as the overall team. Now, the bigger question remains, it's not about the 162 for the Yankees. It will always be about whether or not they win the World Series or not. It's World Series or bust. That's just the way it is with the Yankees. And are they a better team for the 162? Absolutely. Are they a better team for the postseason? I have my doubts because I love how well Juan Soto rose to the occasion, and that remains to be seen with a lot of the guys that have been brought in. Remember, Devin Williams had his own postseason blunder just a couple of months ago. They bring in Max Fried. I think that will help bolster that rotation. I think they'll have more pitching, which will help them out in the playoffs as well. But to me, that bullpen still needs one more piece. We'll see if they add another one here. Master Vinman, did the Rangers sign new TV deal? Yes, they have several different agreements now for the TV contract. They're still negotiating with even more. Some fans were upset that essentially the same cable satellite providers were there, but they still have the Victory Plus stuff. They still have the over-the-air satellite or the over-the-air game as well from the antenna, and now they're looking to still get other deals done. They're not mentioning any names, but the providers that they're looking to get deals done with, Fubo and Hulu, are working on a merger. That seems to be the reason why they didn't get a deal done already with those two. But we'll see if that merger comes into effect before the start of the season. I would doubt it does. And so maybe the Rangers are able to get something done, working with both of them to see what they would be willing to do as far as the contract there. Looking at Dish Network, they have also been mentioned as another provider that they will be speaking with here very, very shortly. Until he finds his core four, perhaps, maybe. I also need to figure out the shit show deal they're in. I wouldn't necessarily say that. I would just say that their rotation is good, as far as having a great a mix of players that are in that 2 to 3 to 4 category, but none of them to me are number one. Sure, Bradish could be one if he bounces back from his injury and continues to progress as a starting pitcher. But even before his injury, I didn't view him as a number one in that rotation. I viewed him as a very good number two. To me, they still need to add a number one, and that's the biggest thing for the Orioles. I would expect them to deal with that at the trade deadline. Let's see here. B. Skrills, welcome back. Appreciate you joining us. Nando, welcome in. Salute Buddy right around the corner. Baseball is right around the corner, my friend. Our pitchers and catchers are less than a couple weeks away. Spring training begins also right around that same time, and then we'll actually get some spring training games in mid to late February. So hopefully we'll have some actual baseball to cover for you here very shortly. Remember, we'll be live every single evening, every single night. We'll bring you the latest as far as the news, rumors, transactions. We'll discuss the state of your team, rotation, lineup, fourth outfielders, bullpen, rotation status, all those kinds of things. If your manager's going to make it through the season, where teams rank, predictions for the end of the season, all those kinds of things and more we will get to here at the Upside. So be sure to hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Jay's got to trade Vlady so they don't end up like the Angels with Ohtani. Well, if they were going to do that, I think they should have done it a couple years ago. Now, if they get to the deadline, they haven't signed him to an extension and have no clear indication about whether or not he's going to re-sign there, I think it would be best for them to try to move on, because I think the writing would be on the wall. There's too much uncertainty there with the Blue Jays that even if I'm Vlad and I love it in Toronto, I don't like uncertainty with my team. And so I would be willing to test the waters. And him being the son of a former Major League player who bounced around a little bit, especially towards the end of his career, he got to see a lot of different places when he was younger and growing up. So I would be very worried about him leaving for another team, and we'll see what happens. But if they're out of contention, say around the All-Star break, I would expect the rumors to continue to get ever so deafening there in Toronto surrounding Vlad Guerrero Jr. But it's not just about him. It's also Bo Bichette. Don't forget, he is also a free agent at the end of the season. Vladdy isn't staying in Toronto. He very well could. I wouldn't say it's ruled out as a possibility right now. Honestly, I don't know if he signs an extension. I don't know if he signs in free agency. I don't know if he leaves at the trade deadline. I don't know if he signs somewhere else in free agency. It's too early to tell any one of those things right now. But I would say that the Toronto Blue Jays are trying to make this team a little bit more solid, a little bit less instability there with the signing of Anthony Santander. Bringing in a guy like Jack Flaherty on a multi-year deal would be another good move for them. A short-term deal with Max Scherzer, I think, still leaves you with a lot of uncertainty going forward. While it makes you better for 2025, And I'm not sure it would convince necessarily Vlad Guerrero to sign there long term because, again, Scherzer's at the end of his career. I'm not sure if he's going to envision playing with Max Scherzer in another 7 years. That's my only worry about them going the Scherzer route rather than Flaherty, Pivetta, Heaney, other starting pitchers that are still out there. Willard, has Bregman signed yet? No, he has not signed yet. Astros are still talking with Jorge Polanco, though. Donnie Bobichette is even gone soon as well. That remains to be seen. For me, Bo Bichette is really all over the place as far as where teams value him. He could be anywhere from a 3-year, $40 million contract in free agency next year to somewhere in the neighborhood of like 3 for $285 million, maybe even more. Last year was just so bad that if he duplicates that performance, I think we're looking at a 3-year, $40 million contract as a realistic possibility. Not saying he'll sign that deal. I'm just saying that's kind of where I envision the market being if he has another horrendous year like he just had last year. Now, if he gets back to MLB average type player, I think he'd do very well in free agency, maybe $120 to $150 million. If he's a little bit above average, getting back to the norm of what we expect for Bo Bichette, maybe he gets to the numbers we see for Willy Adames or what we're talking about for Alex Bregman, 7 for 210. If he gets back to supernova level of Bo Bichette, say like a Bobby Witt Jr. type of impact, then we're talking it closer to the $300 million range. That's why I say Bo Bichette's value is so all over the place right now. It's too early to tell whether or not he's going to re-sign, what the contract's going to look like, what a trade package for him should be. I think Toronto's going to take him into the season, see if they're in contention at the All-Star break, and if they are, they're going to push all the pedals down and try to make a run at it this year. If they don't and they're out of it, say by 10 games by the All-Star break, both of those guys I think very seriously should be considered as very likely trade targets at the deadline. Let's see here. Blue Jays are in a lose-lose situation, in my opinion. They can re-sign Vlady, still not in a good position to win a ring, but trade him all away and be in bad for years to come. I wouldn't necessarily say that's a bad thing, though, for them to re-sign Vlad. I think if you bring back Vlad, the stability goes right away. I think as the instability question goes away for them. So by bringing back Vlad on a contract extension, say it's even like a 7-8 year deal, something like that, or even a really long deal, like 10, 12 years. I think Vladdy would really bring some stability to that team and would be a lot more likely free agent destination for some of the guys that are still out there. For instance, Anthony Santander, Alex Bregman, I think would have viewed Toronto more seriously if they knew Vladdy was signed long term. Same can be said for next year's free agents as well if they get Vladdy back. Now, on the flip side of that, if they don't retain Vladimir Guerrero Jr., then where are they looking? I think if they lose Vladdy, even if they bring in Santander, even if they bring in Alonso, even if they bring in Scherzer and Flaherty, I think this is a team that's going to be going through a retooling phase. I don't think they're necessarily a contender for the World Series. Maybe for the wild card is a best case scenario if they lose Vlad, but ultimately I think it would be time for them to reset and just kind of go through a rebuild process. But at very least, they'll be a retooling team next year if they lose Vlad. Vlad and Bo are gone, very possibly, but we shall see. Let's see here. Got quite a few people in our chat right now. Appreciate you guys joining us. Welcome in Lucas. Welcome in Steven. Appreciate you joining us. Let's see. Got quite a few comments here. I was surprised they didn't move Bichette at last year's deadline. Well, he was having such a poor year last year. Sandy Alcantara, remember, is going to be coming back from injury. That's a guy that we'll be talking about at the trade deadline if he's back and healthy, back to being at the level that we expect. Padres are going to trade Arise and King and C soon. I doubt they trade all three of them. I think they'll at least trade two of them. My guess is they trade Dylan Cease because he's got such high trade value. I think he would bring back more in a trade than Michael King. However, if they're unable to get contract extension talks going in the right direction with King, after you look at the arbitration issues that they're having with him, maybe they go the King route and trade him away and see if they can get a contract extension done with Dylan Cease. However, Luis Arraez and the Padres, I think, are headed for a divorce here at some point in spring training or early in the season. It seems like they're nowhere close as far as what a future contract could look like. And the Padres are very good at getting out of these one-year deals or 1 year left until free agency type of contracts. Just look at what they did with Juan Soto and others that have come to this position. Now, what could they get? maybe they could get a long-term, lower-level prospect, or I say a long-term back into the roster type piece. The guy I'm really thinking of here is Ezekiel Duran from the Texas Rangers. Rangers are still looking to upgrade this team a little bit. They could afford him now that most of the closers are off the board and they haven't really addressed that closer spot there. I still wouldn't rule out the Rangers from adding a closer like a Kyle Finnegan. They have the money to go out there and do it, depending on who you believe. I think they've got between $15 and $18 million based on the way the contracts look like they're structured for Eovaldi, for Jock Peterson, and others. That I think they've got a little bit of money left there. Now, some people don't have the correct roster information out there as far as what the contracts that they signed are worth. They just took the AAV and just applied it across the board. But that's something to kind of keep an eye on with the Texas Rangers. If they go cheap in that bullpen, they could save that money until the trade deadline, which is the most likely scenario. Or if they see a clear opportunity to upgrade, like Luis Arraez, maybe they go that direction as well. But I would say the Padres are more likely to trade 2, but not 3. 3 seems a little bit of a stretch for them. I think they'll try to extend one of those starting pitchers. You think King will be traded to Houston or no? I don't think so. I think Houston doesn't have a whole lot to trade right now. I think that they're trying to get this roster put together. I think they're trying to add one more bat to this lineup rather than a starting pitcher. Now, I understand why Houston might be looking for some starting pitching. They're going to miss, 3 of their starters that they would normally have in their rotation to start the year. McCullers, Garcia, and Javier are not expected to start the season with them. Now, they've got some good young pieces coming. J.P. France is another one that I forgot to mention as well. But this is a team that's going to be kind of an influx for the next couple of years. Framber Valdez is a free agent at the end of the year. Why would you go after another guy with 1 year left on his deal, or a free agent at the end of the year like Framber, in a Michael King? I just don't see that as a legitimate possibility. Now, if we get closer to the deadline and these guys that they're expecting to come back from injury ultimately do not, then maybe they go out there and add somebody as well. But I don't see them adding a King to their rotation at this point. Rafe, Cubs still focused on just having a really good year that they sold their soul to be bad the next 6 years. I don't know about that, because remember, if they sign Kyle Tucker to an extension or in free agency, obviously they keep on trucking, being right in the middle of that division. Now, I would say even without Kyle Tucker, they still have a legitimate chance to win, say, 80 games next year. They'll have the money available to go out there and spend in free agency if they don't spend it on Kyle Tucker. So just by losing Kyle Tucker doesn't mean that they're not going to add somebody back to that lineup. But I would say that the loss of Cam Smith, the loss of Paredes, the long-term costs of bringing in Kyle Tucker will have an effect. They will pay a price for that. And if they lose Kyle Tucker, it'd be all for naught, honestly. But let's see here. Yankees will sign Tucker next year to play center. Very possibly. I think they're one of many teams that will be in there. Nationals, Giants, Mets. I'm sure the Dodgers will be one of the teams that are mentioned. Even the Rangers could revisit this. The Astros, if they free up some money, could be another fit for him as well. But he wants to go to free agency. He has said as much for the last couple of years as well. Donnie, that's why they're playing a Martian in left field, Judge in right. I mean, they still have Bellinger, but Bellinger could obviously move over to first once Goldschmidt has his contract expire at the end of this year. Let's see. I want to see Bregman and Tucker on the Yankees. Astros fans would be crying for years. I mean, that would be a little bit of a sight to see. I will say that. I think Bregman's ultimately not going to go with the Yankees, unfortunately. I think he'd be a great bat for their lineup, but they don't have the funds to really do something like that. Welcome in, Steven. You like Tucker to the Mets in 26? That's the one I'm kind of keeping my eye on as well as Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Cohen has shown the willingness to spend, except for 2 different occasions. And both of those were due to injury risk or sliding performance. Tucker does not have diminishing returns here. And so as far as him going into that lineup there, I think he'd be a better long-term piece there. Same thing with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. over Pete Alonso. I think we can all agree Guerrero is the better player out of the 2. Let's see here. Tucker to the Yankees at the trade deadline, I'm predicting. Well, that would mean the Cubs are out of it. I wouldn't say that's a 0% chance, but I would say it's unlikely to happen because I think that division isn't going to run away from anybody. I think the Cubs are going to be, 5-6 games back at worst by the trade deadline because I think that division is going to be, 85, 90 wins, 92 wins on the high end. On the low end, I think we're looking at the Cardinals there at maybe 75 wins. I think everybody else falls right into that window there. So I wouldn't necessarily say they're going to be out of it by the deadline, which might preclude them from trading Kyle Tucker. Now, if things go poorly, like really poorly, and they're 15 games out by the All-Star break, then we could revisit this conversation. Yankees would be one team that I'd keep an eye out for. Mets would be another one as far as a team that's looking to make an impact acquisition at the trade deadline. Tucker would certainly fit that description. Uh, let's see here. If the Cubs deal Tucker at the trade deadline, they might be a worse organization than the Angels. That's a very big statement there, my friend. Angels, to me, take the cake, and they will still take the cake for years to come with how they handled Shohei Ohtani, how they invested in this team, how they failed to invest in starting pitching time and time and time and time and time and time and time again. It'd be a lot to become at the level, the incompetence that we saw from the Angels towards the end of the Shohei Ohtani era. The Angels done a nice job pivoting there. I really hope they don't go the big splash route. But if they lose, if they trade Tucker there at the deadline, if things don't work out, would I think they're on the level of the Angels? No, not by a million miles. Let's see here. Dodgers got the power. They do. Cable is better. As far as the TV deal, I mean, there's a lot of options now for Rangers fans. That's something they could not have said years ago. Rafe, I grew up in the wrong generation. I want to live in the days when I didn't need 13 different streaming services to watch all the different things I want to watch. Yeah, I mean, just TV is a lot different. A lot more people are interested in watching TV first and foremost. TV was more considered, it was more respectable, I'll put it back in the day. There was a lot more thought that went into the programming that went on TV. Nowadays, anybody with just a camera, some lights, and an internet connection can stream something on YouTube, like me. And they can call this content. Even channels are made from YouTube that eventually turn into regular TV programs. Looking at Pat McAfee, looking at Foul Territory. Not saying anything wrong with that. I'm just saying look at how the standards have really changed as far as how you get into the business from back then to now. It's just a completely different era. Not saying that there's anything good or bad about it. It's just very different the way things are done now versus the way things are done, say, 20, 30 years ago. Now, as far as the TV bundling, streaming, all that kind of thing, I'll put it this way. You're never going to have one TV provider have everything you're ever going to want ever at any given time. Now, there's sure going to be some options that might group things together to some degree, but individually they'll still be on different services. For instance, like Amazon still gives you access to utilize Hulu or whatever else you want to use on that Fire Stick. That's kind of the format you could see all the different packages come underneath the same umbrella of. Hank, Bregman on the Yankees would be amazing. I think it would be, but I don't think they're going to do it. I think they're going to try to save their money with Stroman, and then at the deadline, try to make an impact acquisition at that point for a big bat, and then spend in the offseason next year. But Stroman is their first priority to see if they can get rid of that one. Steven, 47 watching with 10 likes. Ouch. Ouch, ouch, ouch. Let me take a look. We're up to 15 now, but yeah, let's see if we can bump that one up, guys. Hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that heart in the chat if you don't mind, if you're enjoying the show. If you're not, I completely understand. But if you enjoy talking baseball with us every single night, be sure to hit that like and subscribe. It really does go a long way to helping out our channel. So thank you, Stephen, for mentioning that. Hit that like button. It means a lot to us here. So we greatly appreciate that as well. I did see we got one there anyway, so thank you. Appreciate that. Let's see here. Willard, do you think Astros will re-sign Bregman and move Paredes to the outfield? I think that's a possibility. I think he's looking for a longer-term deal right now, but the market for him is crystal clear. We will have a decision on Bregman at some point in the next few days. As far as, where, I think it's anybody's guess between the Cubs and Blue Jays. I think the Astros are still there on the periphery. Angels are a team to still be mentioned, as well as the Red Sox. But I think Cubs, probably the most likely to me, but only by a fraction. Let's see here. I think as far as the Astros, I think they'll add one more piece, a lower cost option that will keep them below the tax threshold rather than spending it on Alex Bregman unless he takes that team-friendly deal. He is the only player they will exceed that tax threshold for. Hank, what a solution? Yes, it would be. Rafe, please, I just hope and pray DeGrom can pitch in the playoffs. Please, please, please. I mean, I think we all are hoping for that. Even if you aren't say you aren't a DeGrom fan, if you're not a fan of the Texas Rangers. Me, I like seeing smart baseball decisions. I like seeing great baseball being played, and I like seeing the drama of a Game 7. That's what I love to see. So, even if I wasn't a fan of the Texas Rangers, we'll use, say, the Houston Astros, the arch rival of my favorite team. I still want to see them healthy and at full strength. because I want my favorite team to beat them at their full strength. I don't believe in winning by injury or default. I don't like that kind of a thing. I still want to see baseball being played as its best. So, for instance, the Dodgers, I don't hate on them at all for everything that they've been able to do. They've done everything within the rules. Now, will the rules eventually change? Absolutely. You can guarantee that the deferral loophole will be closed in some way, shape, or form. But I don't begrudge the Dodgers for doing everything in their power to try to win. Because in the same situation, if my Rangers were there, I'd be wanting them to do the same dang thing. Same thing if you're a Pirates fan and you had all this financial wherewithal, you would be in the same boat wanting them to make every single addition they possibly could. And you can't really fault the Dodgers fans for celebrating the fact that they have an ownership group that does those kinds of things. Now, is it bad for baseball? I don't think so. We've seen that in years past when super teams are assembled anyway. Interest in the sport generally goes up. You get all these small market teams always crying boo-hoo, foul, it's all unfair. Go out there and prove that you can still win on the baseball field. If you're the Pittsburgh Pirates, you're not expected to compete financially with the Dodgers, but you know what? You are expected to compete on the field. You still have Paul Skeens. You still have a good rotation. Improve that offense. If you're the Cleveland Guardians, you have an opportunity here to really embrace the team that you had. Why did we trade away Josh Naylor there, one of your best offensive pieces, without having a long-term plan there? Now, sure, they got a nice stopgap option there with Carlos Santana. I think they could have gotten an extension done with Naylor, but you understand how they go out there and do it. But again, I'll ask you guys, are you guys expected to compete financially with the Dodgers? No. Where are you expected to compete? On the field. And they certainly have a good starting rotation. They have one of the best bullpens in the game, a couple of the best relievers in the game, and they added Paul Sewald to it. They are looking for a center fielder. I will mention that. That's one of the news items that I hadn't mentioned yet, is that they are looking for a center fielder right now. They started 9 different guys there this year. I would like to see them add somebody, maybe somebody like a Leody Taveras for Texas that was floated by MLB Trade Rumors today as an idea for them in center field. If Evan Carter is healthy and takes over that position in center, maybe Taveras could be traded there at some point, and maybe a fourth outfielder type, a right-handed hitter, goes back to Texas in the deal, maybe a bullpen arm as well, especially considering the depth in that bullpen that they have there in Cleveland right now. But again, I like seeing the best baseball being played no matter where it is, and I just like seeing smart baseball decisions no matter if it's for my favorite team or for my arch nemesis. So I would rather see good baseball being played at all times, and I hope you guys feel the same way. Let's see here. Bregman, not to the Yankees. Agree there. Bregman, please, to New York. It's not going to happen as much as you might hope for it. B. Skrills, it looks like Bregman might stay in Houston. It's a possibility. I'd say it's less than likely. I'd say Cubs, Blue Jays more likely at this point, but can't rule them out at this point unless Bregman just has a change of heart and just says, hey, I really want to stay in Houston, much like Pete Alonso just wants to stay a member of the Mets. They're going to have to agree to team-friendly deals in order to do so. Vlady and Bo will be on their way out in Toronto, possibly, but until they actually do leave, you never really know. All the media is going to ask their questions. Trade deadline will be another point of which they could possibly be on the way out the door. But again, this whole offseason for Toronto begins and ends with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Vladdy is Canadian. He will stay, very possibly. I mean, he played. He was Vladimir Guerrero Sr. was his dad. Played in Montreal for all those years. Played out on the West Coast all those years as well. Texas, Baltimore. I think he finished up his career with as well. I think it's safe to say he's comfortable wherever he needs to be. He was the son of a major leaguer. He understands the business, and so he wants to maximize his value. Understandably so. We'll see if he plays third base this year. It kind of increases value there, but we shall see. Vladdy doing all he can to get to the Rangers. See why works in mysterious ways. We shall see, my friend. I would love to see it, but I think we got Berger. I don't think having Jake Berger, though, will keep them from bringing in Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I think they would then figure out something else long-term with Berger if they decide to bring in a guy like Vladdy. But I think the first priority for them is going to be pitching next year, and if they have money left over, maybe a guy like Tucker in the outfield to replace Adolis Garcia would be a little bit more of an interest, because I think they have some good infielders coming up in the minors right now, or at the major league level, that could handle things at first base for a year. But Vladdy is going to have such a big market, just like Kyle Tucker. I still think the Rangers are going to target pitching more than anything else. That's what CY really does. Rafe, let's see here. This thing jumped all the way down, so let me try to catch up to these comments here. The only team I want to see Vlady is on the Rangers. I don't want to see that happening. So actually, I lied. Either Blue Jays or Mets, if not the Rangers. I mean, he's going to do very well in free agency. That's pretty much where we can agree on at this point. Until he agrees or doesn't agree to that extension, we don't really know what's going to happen. And then we're going to get all the speculation we could ever hope for after that. If the Yankees trade Stroman, then I see Mad Max signing, possibly. But I'm not sure that would even happen if they did it. I think they would try to keep that powder dry rather than spend it on another starting pitcher. I think they're looking for an impact bat. They're looking for a bullpen piece, a left-handed reliever as well. They're looking for another option as far as a second base, third base option there. But maybe they decide to trade, DJ LeMahieu and Marcus Stroman to a team like the Angels with a couple of prospects to free up their finances, and then they could do a number of different things to improve this roster. Sean, when will Bregman sign, and will it be before the season? When will he sign? I would say sometime before Monday would be my guess at this point. The market for him is so crystal clear on Bregman. There's no reason for this to go on any longer. There's not a dark horse team that's going to jump in here. We know the numbers of the Houston Astros. We know the numbers for the Detroit Tigers. We know what the mindset is for Boston. We know Toronto is in there with the money. We know the Cubs are certainly looking both short and long term on Bregman, and they're all in on 2025. So you got to think that's the real one murky issue. Do they get to the contract that Bregman wants? Or does he ultimately say, I'd rather stay in Houston? Or does he say, hey, not enough here in Chicago. Toronto certainly got a good enough offer. I'll go ahead and sign there. So we kind of know the market fairly well, even as outside observers of Alex Bregman. That's why I say this market is so crystal clear right now that I would expect a deal very, very soon. Ray Davis getting ready to learn bank loan, buddy. I don't know about that one. But as far as like the Rangers go, I love the way they've got this Rangers sports network set up, and it's only going to get better. I think they're going to add at least a couple more TV providers before the start of the season, and I think this is the best TV package the Rangers have had in at least 10 years. So we'll see what they ultimately do. Donnie, Rays just signed Kim today, 2 years, $29 million. That was what we led our show with. Rays spending a little bit here in free agency to kind of avoid having an MLB PA grievance filed against them for not spending enough to be able to get part of that revenue sharing. Now, of course, they have Wander Franco getting his legal issues taken care of down out of the country anyway. I don't think he'll ever be able to restart his career. But you got a great young superstar coming in Junior Caminero. I think Kim give you some insurance until he is fully ready for 162 games a season. Kim gives you that professionalism, the multi-positional versatility, and I think he's going to be an invaluable piece to that team there. Lucas, don't worry, we'll show him the PowerPoint presentation. We shall see. Kim to the Rays move came out of nowhere. Yes, it certainly did. Sad to see the San Diego Padres downfall coming up. I wanted them to beat LA so bad. I don't know about that. I think the Padres are still in just a good enough position. I think that their ownership issues as far as the lawsuit are a bit of a hindrance to this organization, but I still think they're good enough to compete for a wild card. Do I think they're good enough to beat the Dodgers for the division? Probably not. But all you have to do is get into the wild card, and then you never know. If Musgrove's healthy, Darvish throws his best game of the season, the offense turns around, Xander Bogaerts finally figures out how to play off or how to hit down there in San Diego as opposed to just in Boston. That's kind of the improvements that you're hoping for this season. And then, of course, you got the three guys that I mentioned, Arise, King, and Cease, all headed for free agency at the end of the year. Who do they ultimately bring back via trade? Because, again, I expect two of those to be traded before we get to the All-Star break. Donnie, Padres will trade at least two of them. I agree. Rafe, could Duran, Tavares, or Gray be of any interest to the Cards for a Helsley trade? Gray, no. Duran, yes. Tavares, no. Duran has a good enough prospect, good enough standing as a unproven prospect that he would have some value to the Cardinals, but zero interest in Gray. They don't need another veteran starter. They're trying to use those roster spots for young guys. Tavares only clogs up their outfield even more than it already is. They're not looking to bring him in. So Duran would be the only one there, and I don't think it would even cost a Duran to get this trade done. I think they would be looking more at minor league prospects more than anything else. Duran, I think, is too valuable for the Rangers in that specific type of a deal, and I think they could get the trade done without even have to worry about touching their major league roster to get it done. You think King and Arise go? I think Arise does. I think Cease has more trade value, so I think he'd bring back more via trade. However, King, they're having a harder time getting that arbitration done and the extension, so maybe they decide to move him and see if they can get a deal done with Dylan Cease. Cease at the trade deadline, I hope not. I hope it gets traded earlier than that because, again, diminishing returns via trade at the deadline for expiring deals. Yankees will go all in on Tucker next season. They very well could. They very well could. Osvaldo, welcome in. First time I think I've seen you in our chat. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. We've got about 45 in our chat right now. Let's see how many likes we're up to. We got it bumped up to 20, guys. Come on now. Let's see if we can bump that up a little bit here. We got 45 of you guys in here. At least 40 of you have been watching pretty much this entire time. Hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really does go a long way to helping us out. So thank you very much for doing so. I cannot tell you how important it is that you guys do that. It means a lot to us here, trying to grow this channel as much as we can and just bring in as many people as we possibly can. All different fan bases. We want to cover MLB as best as we possibly can, get as many viewpoints in here as we possibly can, talk trades, lineups, everything, all the news and speculation you hope for, that you want to get all the news in one spot. Get it here every night here at the Upside. Follow us on X at Upside Ascend and on Facebook, Upside Sports Network as well. Anytime we post a video, anytime we go live, we will post it there as well to let you guys know, just in case you have your notifications turned off for YouTube. YouTube, I think, only limits you to like 3 notifications a day from YouTube. And so if you follow like 84 different channels, you might only get 3 different notifications that day. So if you want to follow us on those other platforms, you can, and then be notified there when we go live as well. Donnie, Dodgers aren't winning the championship yet. You still have to play the games. Absolutely agree there. Will Bregman sign before the season? Absolutely, yes, he will. Donnie, Rangers channel will be like yes for the Yankees? I certainly hope so. That really was the biggest difference for the Yankees, when they first brought up the Yes Network. I don't think it'll have the same effect because, again, TV very different right now than what it was, say, 30 years ago. But I think it'll be a far better situation than anything the Rangers have ever had, certainly for the last 10 years. And having their own ability to negotiate TV rights, to negotiate with carriers, those kinds of things, and even be able to stream the games themselves on Victory Plus, I think bodes very well for Texas going forward there. Stroman has to go first. I agree. Cowboys Nation, make yourself a developer on your Fire Stick, and you can get everything. Really? I'm not too much of a tech wizard when it comes to that kind of a thing. But I will have one of my friends look into that, I suppose. Let's see here. Donnie, hit those likes. Thank you, my friend. And subscribe. Appreciate that. Sarcastic, welcome in. What will Bregman's contract be on how many years? I still think 7 for $210 is within reason right now for Bregman. I get it. All the teams are kind of disappearing on his market. I get it. It's taking so long. Maybe he'll have to settle for a short-term deal. Maybe he'll have to take the team-friendly deal. I still think there's a contract offer out there with his name on it for 7 for $210 from Toronto. I think a contract from the Cubs will be in that same range there. Red Sox, I don't think they necessarily have a contract on the table anymore to him because I don't think their thinking is that he's the fit for them. I think there's too much confusion in that front office to say that they're going to invest that type of money in him. Detroit Tigers, I'm sure they have a short-term deal standing out there for him if he wants to do that. And then, of course, the Astros, 6 for $156. We already know what the floor is for him as well. When will Pete Alonso sign? That one's a little tricky. Ken Rosenthal still thinks there's a marriage between the two happening there with the New York Mets. I'm of the thinking that it's still possible. Likely it remains to be seen. I would say it's more hopeful than it was, say, a week ago. All the back and forth between Cohen, Boris, and Alonso really tells me one thing. He wants to stay a member of the New York Mets. So even if that's on a short-term, team-friendly deal, maybe they get something done. The contract offers, as we reported last night, 3 for $70 is where the club is at right now after upping their offer from 3 for $62, 3 for $66, and now 3 for $70. Alonso wants that deal around 3 for $100, 3 for $95. I don't think it'll get quite that high. I think best case scenario, if he wants to stay a member of the New York Mets, 3 for $85 is where this thing could ultimately be headed if he stays with the New York Mets. If he doesn't, then we're talking probably a long-term deal with the Toronto Blue Jays. Vlad Guerrero has already said he's willing and wants to play third base next season. Increases defensive versatility, increased free agent contracts, all those kinds of things. And, oh, by the way, he can handle a position. He played a few games there last year. He came up as a third baseman. I'm sure he would love to play the position that he grew up at, playing the most. So we'll see what happens there. But I would say Pete Alonso, as far as when, I would say Pete Alonso signs probably after Bregman, but before the start of this the beginning of the Major League season. Hopefully it gets done before spring training. I think there's enough time for it to get done, but it's going to depend a lot on what the Mets do over the next week or two with that offer. If they don't budge from 3 for 70, this thing could take a little bit. If they budge a little bit and are starting to come up to that 3 for 85, he could sign rather quickly. So we'll see where he goes, but I think he ultimately does want to go back to the Mets and likely will go to one of the Blue Jays or the Mets, in my opinion. I got that already, but not the point. Got you. Bregman be 5 years with opt-outs and $200 million. That's a heck of a contract. $40 million essentially is what you'd be getting AAV-wise. That's a hefty deal. 5 for 200 I think is a little rich. I think we're probably looking at best 6 for 200, but my guess is going to go ahead and be 7 for 210 more than likely. DeGrom, Ohtani, Strider, Kershaw, a lot of solid arms coming back this season. Absolutely. A lot of injuries coming in to the Major League starting pitching over the last, 10 years. I think injuries for starting pitchers are up, 150-something percent, 200%. And I think it's attributable to, spin rates, velocity, loss of sticky stuff, over-gripping the ball, overthrowing, all those kinds of things. Pitch clock ultimately didn't have anything to do with it. None of the numbers bore that out. And I think it's more about the torque that they're putting on their arms, the way they're gripping the ball, the use of the type of pitches that they're throwing, and how much effort they're putting on those pitches, spin rate, all those kinds of things. But hopefully those guys get and stay healthy going forward, and maybe as more of this science continues to come out, some of these younger pitchers learn to get back to being a better pitcher overall, rather than just a thrower when they come up to the big leagues. Nobody likes smart baseball or baseball at its best. All we want is the Rangers to sweep every team, score 15 a game, and shut out every team. I mean, I'd love it as a Rangers fan, but I still want to see competitive games too. I mean, I don't necessarily want it to be that boring. I mean, to me, to win that way would be very boring to watch. Not that watching the home runs would be boring or anything like that, but just the final outcome itself would be boring if it ended up that way. But you still have to play the games, my friend. All right, let's try to catch up on a few of these other comments here. Most already use it. Okay. Fire Stick, when you set up the developer, you can save $50 a month and then get every channel and streaming service. Cost me $90 a month for Wi-Fi and setup. Interesting. I have not done that. I'll have to look into that one. Sean, where does Rizzo sign? Good question there, Sean. I would say it's still the same bet for me. I would still say the Cubs and Giants are the most likely. This might be the final season for Rizzo because I don't think he's got that much left in the tank. The concussion issues that he had with the Yankees, were something real. Could be a fit there with the Diamondbacks, like you mentioned, but I think Naylor already fills their hole there out there in Arizona. But for me, I think the most likely option is going to be the Cubs or the Giants. I think a reunion with the Cubs would be the best thing for me, just the storylines, all that, and I think they could use another offensive player at first base to kind of help them out, and Rizzo could bring some leadership to that clubhouse. Remember, the Yankees' issues when Rizzo went down were about leadership, and they didn't really have much when Rizzo left that clubhouse. And going into a young team like that that's trying to compete and win in 2025, I think would only be good things for the Chicago Cubs as well. Donnie, Vlady staying with the Jays right now? Who knows? We shall see. We'll check in here in just a moment on X to see if anything is going down this evening. Then I yell lags even though it costs 100 times less. Okay. Master Vinman, besides the Cubs, what team is under the most pressure to win in 25? Good question, Vinman. Everybody says the Blue Jays, but I'm not going to list them because I think the front office gets along very well with the ownership there. I understand the reasons why the national media thinks they could be all on the hot seat. I don't think it's nearly as dire a situation as the media makes it sound. I think they're in rather comfortable seating because of how that front office is viewed by the ownership there. Teams that are under real pressure, I would say a team like Boston, while they have a good young nucleus coming, once again, the fan base is going to be going, hey, you promised us you were going to spend last year. Then you said, oh, our bad, we'll go ahead and spend this year, and you still didn't spend. Now, they sure did improve this team this year, I will say that much. But this team, I think, is one impact bat away from winning the division, or at least being very close to winning the division, being a type of team that you can consider as a contender in the American League. I think they have that much talent on that roster coming, and oh, by the way, they've got even more on the way. Now, I wouldn't say they're necessarily under pressure to start the year, but I will say if this thing goes off the rails, if they're just the deficiencies on that team prove to be on that offense because they didn't bring in Alex Bregman or a player like that, we could be talking about a completely different animal there in Boston. So kind of keep your eyes on that situation. Another one I want to mention, let's see. To me, it's going to be the Philadelphia Phillies. Not because of where they are at, but I think where they've been. They were expected to be one of the World Series contending teams each of the last 2 years. Now they have the Trey Turner contract didn't work out quite as well as they had hoped. Hoping for a bounce back year this year. Nick Castellanos, Taijuan Walker, Jesus Luzardo anyway. All big contracts that I have my questions about. And this team is not really seen as as one of the most flexible teams in the league right now. I think bringing in Max Scherzer would have been a good boon to that rotation, shaking things up, reinstilled some energy, because that's what Max Scherzer brings day in and day out. That hyper-competitive nature would have been great in that clubhouse, and I think it would have gone a long way for the Philadelphia Phillies. That's not going to happen. They don't have the funds to make it happen. So, as a result, their shakeup might come from the top, and we'll see what happens there. So, keep them in mind as far as one of the teams under the most pressure. And then the last one I'll mention is the Houston Astros. Mainly because of where this team had been and where it looks like they're headed towards. They did a nice job pivoting from Kyle Tucker, got a few future assets for it, but they have more work to do. They have to figure out what they're going to do with Framber Valdez long term. Alvarez has only got a couple years left on his deal. What are they going to do with him? And then as far as the rest of this team, what does the long-term outlook of this team look like? Because right now, outside of Framber Valdez, I don't see anybody capable of being a number one on that team. Now, Javier might get there, Garcia might get there, but for me, they're not there yet. Injury question marks abound for both of those guys. I need some more pitching in that rotation if I'm the Houston Astros going forward, and that lineup needs a little bit of work. Remember, that outfield doesn't have a lot to speak for right now, and we'll see if they bring in one or two pieces here before the start of the season. But to me, that's one team that I would expect to be under fire as well. You know, more about the future than anything else. But those would be the teams that I would say are under the pressure anyway there. Bo is leaving Toronto soon. I don't know about that one. Again, the volatility of his performance and the volatility of that contract are all over the place. I think best case scenario would be at the trade deadline, and then you'll have a better idea of what he'll be worth on the open market, what his trade cost is going to be, all of those kinds of things as well. Ryan Presley is recruiting Bregman. I would imagine so. I mean, the fractured relationship that was mentioned by Dana Brown yesterday, good on him again for acknowledging his part in that role, in his role in Ryan Presley ultimately deciding to accept the trade to the Chicago Cubs and waive his no-trade clause there. But, if I'm Ryan Presley, I'd be trying to win in Chicago. He's only got a couple years left in his career left. He's, 37, 38 years old, 1 year left on his deal. He's looking to win and win right now, and that's what the Cubs are looking to do. We'll see if they can get this one across the finish line. Why haven't the Cardinals signed anyone? They just signed somebody the other day. I forget who it was. But thank you for the likes there. I guess that popped up on my screen from me doing a thumbs up, I think. Huh, cool. I didn't notice that before. Interesting. Let's see here. Why haven't the Cardinals signed anyone? They're not really looking to sign, free agents this year. They're looking to see what they have to develop more than anything else. Rafe, does the Rangers TV deal help with free agency? Feel like we've heard about free agency being hesitant, signing with the Rangers because of it, even without their already built-up lineup. I don't necessarily know about that. I mean, TV deals, say, a couple of years ago or even last year was the issue there. Primarily last year was the issue. Now their TV deal, they're expecting it to be very lucrative for them. They're not restricting their spending right now because of the TV deal. I think they're restricting their spending because Ray Davis doesn't want to go into the tax again. Now, if there's a clear, definitive chance for them to win the series, say at the trade deadline, maybe he'll go into the tax for something like that. But until they get to that position again, I think he's going to kind of keep this team within a certain financial range to avoid paying tax for no reason. They've already filled a lot of the holes on this roster. You can't say they didn't. The one thing that they still have a hole on for me is in that closer, and then you have to look for another innings eater. I think they could get both done without having to add payroll above the tax threshold, which is, again, good for the Rangers long term. Everyone except the ones, okay. If Bregman becomes If Bregman comes to the Cubs, will Nico be traded? No, I don't think so. I think they're going to try to win in 25, and Horner is a part of that team that would help them to win in 25. Kyle Tucker, get ready to learn PowerPointese. Let's see here. There's your 20. Thank you, Johnny. Let's see here. What are we up to now? We're up to 24. That's a little better. Getting up there. You should do team previews. We will try to do a little bit of that. We'll probably do that during spring training, kind of like how baseball or MLB Network does 30 teams in 30 days. We might do something like that. Do like at the end of the video every single day, a 5-minute preview of where the team is at. We could do something like that. I heard a rumor that Hoskins getting dealt from Milwaukee, but I don't see that happening. Absolutely agree there. I think they want to keep him as kind of the veteran influence in that clubhouse right now, and they need his bat. Lucas, Wyatt Langford, and Corey Seager hitting bombs every inning is interesting as it gets. I would agree there. I love Wyatt Langford. I think he's going to have a great year. How great of a year remains to be seen. I think we're talking about a player that at his peak for this season, I think could rival Corey Seager's as far as his impact. I think at worst we're looking at, I wouldn't say a star. I would say just beneath a star level player for the Rangers. I think Wyatt Langford has superstar written all over him. Speed, defense, power, hits for average. I think he can do it all. And we saw him kind of put most of it together there in September. I think having an offseason after playing the entire year is going to do wonders for him, kind of learning how pitchers were trying to pitch to him, how they're handling him. And of course, the pitchers are going to try to adapt to him. But I think Wyatt Langford has all the tools, all the makings of a true superstar. Rizzo has had some problems, probably his last. I would agree there. Y. Burns said he was stopped focusing on K rate and went to more innings per approach. Still a filthy slider, but he stays available. Seems like some of it is billed as well. Couldn't agree more. Burns, to me, I think learned how to pitch. That's what you kind of have to do as you get older. Instead of being a hard thrower, you learn how to get outs. You're not necessarily worried about your K rate as much, even though front offices will tell you your stuff is diminishing, all that kind of stuff. It's all about getting outs. And once you get paid, you're not really worried about how you do it. You're more about trying to get the result. And Corbin Burns is a good pitcher to kind of look at here. Clayton Kershaw is another one. Kershaw used to be a very different pitcher. He's been 3 different pitchers in his career. And the most recent iteration of him is not necessarily a strikeout artist. It's a guy that pitches to contact, pitches to weak contact as well. Let's see here. Johnny, Cubs are trading for players. It seems like they only have 1 year before free agencies. Tucker is just the beginning. I would agree there. Lots of question marks about the Cubs. But again, if they lose Tucker in free agency, they could easily go out there and spend on free agents next year as well, not named Kyle Tucker, if they lose him. So while it might seem all is lost if you lose Kyle Tucker there, I think they could rebound nicely in free agency. Would it be as good as Kyle Tucker? Probably not. But we shall see. I'm intrigued to see if Taj takes a step forward this season. We'll see. Master Vinman, for all you craving baseball ASAP, the 2025 Caribbean Series starts Friday afternoon. This is my PSA. All right. Johnny, let's see here. Looks like Hunter Brown could be the new number 1 for Houston if he's as good as he was last year. He struggled in the first month or so of the season, but ever since then, he was a great pitcher for pretty much 5 months last year for the Astros. I want to see him do it for 1 more year before I consider him, to be that type of a pitcher, a guy that you can count on day in and day out to be a win day type of a pitcher. If you're having, say you have a 5 games in a row, say Sunday through Friday, or Sunday through Thursday anyway, you have 5 games. You lose Sunday, you lose Monday, you lose Tuesday, you lose Wednesday. Hunter Brown's your starter for that last game of that. Is it win day? Hey, do we stop the losing streak today kind of a pitcher? Or is it, hey, is this just a guy that's still learning at the major league level, growing, will be eventually there, but, not ready yet? Those are the questions I have for Hunter Brown this year. Was last year kind of the building blocks of what a pitcher we can expect for going forward? Or is this the first foray into the league and hitters are kind of learning more about Hunter Brown as they go along? I want to see him prove the results 1 more time. We had questions about Logan Gilbert, say, 2 years ago in kind of the same fashion. Look at the way he kind of kept on going. But for every Logan Gilbert, there's 15 other guys who have a great rookie campaign and then ultimately fall flat on their face. So we'll have to see how he does. I'm not saying Hunter Brown's going to fail. I'm just saying I want to see him prove it before I expect it from him. Where will Rizzo end up? Again, Cubs and Giants would be, for me, the two favorites for him. I would guess the Cubs. That would be the most interesting storyline for me. Bobuchet's number is anywhere between Teoscar Hernandez all the way up to Trey Turner. That's kind of what I'm thinking here, Lucas, as well. Trade trees. We'll see. Let's see. Will Cardinals be sellers at the deadline? They will. Just the nature of the beast here. They'll try to trade a couple of their veteran starting pitchers. If they haven't already traded Ryan Helsley or Arenado, they will then trade those guys as well. But for me, I certainly would have traded Ryan Helsley by now. I mean, you look at the need for relief pitching, how much money is really going around. It's crazy how much people are getting paid as far as relievers right now. Tommy Kahnle just got $7.75 million. He's not a closer. He's not an eighth inning setup guy. He's a middle relief, high leverage guy that comes in, for a couple of outs here and there. I mean, you can get a little bit more out of him from time to time, but primarily, he's not seen as one of those high leverage arms. He's seen as a guy that can come in and get one or two specific outs more than anything else. And he got paid. Relievers are getting paid. So why are the Cardinals holding on to Ryan Helsley in a year when they're trying to rebuild? Or retool a little bit. If you're trying to retool, why wouldn't you try to get the best draft position you could? Why are you trying to save the game in the ninth inning and try to win in 2025? The goal is to win in 26 and going forward, and have 25 be the year of development. Move somebody else, a younger person, back there, and maybe you develop another great closer back there who has 5 years of control. Meanwhile, Helsley is going to be a free agent at the end of the year. We know he's going to be leaving at some point. If you are able to get an extension done or sign him in free agency, absolutely would be great. But I mean, you're not expecting that. You're hoping to be able to trade him for something valuable at the trade deadline. But for me, I'd rather trade him before the start of the season because, again, injuries, poor performance have been issues for him before. There's nothing to say it won't be an issue for him again. As far as Arenado, we got some news today anyway that everything was pretty much stagnant on Nolan Arenado. Not a surprise. I told you guys that's pretty much what's been the case ever since the Astros thing happened. But once we get to spring training, teams will see what the rosters look like, say, hey, I didn't really fill third base as well as I would have hoped. Let me see who I can add. Then you'll see the market churn for Nolan Arenado. Maybe a guy will go down due to injury at first, third, or DH. Hoping it doesn't happen, but if it does, then the Cardinals will have another team as a suitor for Nolan Arenado. But I would expect him to be traded before the start of the season. When you read this message, it's your chance to go over your notes and take a break from the comments. Thanks, Rafe. I'll go ahead and do that. Just a couple of other notes before I kind of log out for the night anyway. Estevez went to the Royals, Kahnle to the Tigers. One trade that we did say the Reds made a trade for a reliever, Taylor Rogers. So good move for them, strengthening that bullpen. They were looking to bring in Carlos Estevez, so when that didn't happen or became clear that wasn't happening, they went the trade route for Rogers. So again, deepening that bullpen, shortening the game for some of those starting pitchers that have struggled to get deep into games. They still need one more innings eater type of starter to me. They added Hayes yesterday as well, another good outfielder for them. Now they get the bullpen piece. Now the one piece left on this team for them to go out there and get is a number 5, 6 type of starter. They did DFA Owen White once again. Second time he's been DFA'd in about a month. So I was hoping he'd be able to latch on there in spring training and maybe push for that last spot in that rotation, but it's not going to happen. We'll see if he stays with the club or if he gets claimed by another one as well. Let's see here. Which team would have the biggest make or break season? So if they start off bad, they become sellers and enter a retool mode, or if they start off as winners, they're going to go all in and make a run. Blue Jays come to mind first. Cubs come to mind as well. But as far as teams that we haven't really talked about, Phillies I think could be in that group there if they have a terrible start to the season. Their shakeup was really hard to kind of imagine because of all the contracts that they have. But if this thing gets off to a poor start, maybe they look to move some of their longer-term pieces rather than the Castellanos, Alec Boehm type players that they were looking to move this offseason. Am I saying it's likely? Probably not. But I am saying that would be one to keep an eye on as well. Other teams, Tigers got rumors all during the offseason last year and all throughout the regular season up to the trade deadline on Skubal. Ultimately, they held on to him. If things go poorly for the Tigers, maybe they revisit some of those negotiations as well. There's not really a whole lot outside of the Cubs and Blue Jays. Those are the two quintessential, make or break type of a season there. for those clubs there. So those would be my two most logical answers. But kind of the out-of-the-box ones, again, Phillies were one and Tigers the other one. I'm so welcome in. Appreciate you joining us as well. I don't know why people like Vlad Jr. He's not going to age well. Plus, he's a first baseman. I would never give him $400 million. He's a third base and first baseman as well. He's trying to reestablish his viability at third. He played, I think, 10 games last year. He's still a pretty decent first baseman, as defensively anyway. He can still run the bases decently outside of the major gaffe that he had in the postseason against the Twins a couple of years ago. But all in all, he is one of the most prolific bats in the game. He certainly will do very well in free agency. Whether or not you think he's worth 400 or not, he's going to get very close to that, if not well above that at this point. Sean, who got DFA'd, Owen White, who was DFA'd by the Rangers, now got DFA'd by the Cincinnati Reds. Matt Festa, another guy who got DFA'd by the Rangers, was DFA'd by the Chicago Cubs, and a few others as well. I'd like to 100%. I would 100% take Vlady now. The $400 million depends on the years, but he'd be a major upgrade for us Rangers. I mean, say he signed for 10 for 40. I think that'd be a little rich for us if you're a Texas Rangers fan, because again, that's another $40 million contract. I'd rather sign two players for that money, even though I know how good Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is. I would still rather split that money up, and I don't think if they're going to add somebody at that salary, that would be a position player. I think their first priority, again, would be for a starting pitcher. But again, to the bigger point here, is Vladdy worth that money? Without a doubt. He certainly is worth that kind of money as far as impact to that lineup. I think he'd be well worth the money for at least 5 years of the deal. Let's go ahead and just say it's an even, 10 years, $400 million. It'd probably end up being something like 12 for 450, 13 for 450, something crazy like that. We all know the back half of that deal is going to look ugly. We know it's going to look a lot like the Miguel Cabrera contract. We know it's going to look like Prince Fielder. We know it's going to look like Albert Pujols. Any of those deals look great by the end of them. No, they did not. So I'll agree with you on that one. But you sign him for what he's going to give you for the first half of that contract. And if, for some reason, you're able to win a World Series, say Texas were to sign him, the Rangers have only ever won one World Series. When did they win that one? The year they signed Jacob deGrom, Nathan Eovaldi. They traded for Max Scherzer. They traded for Jordan Montgomery. Did all those moves work out great? No, they did not. And honestly, the deGrom deal, if they had to do it over again, I still think they would do the move again, because they were going all in to try to win and get to the postseason and win a series. That was their goal. They didn't really think they would get all the way to the World Series. Understandably, you hope you win every year. But realistically, they had an organizational mandate to get back to and win a postseason series, and they threw everything they could into it. By the way, that's the first World Series championship in franchise history in over 50 years. Now you're saying, hey, for another $400 million over 10 to 12 years, would you be willing to do it all over again to get another World Series, a second one within a couple of years? I think the Rangers would sign up for that money as well. Let's see here. What I've been reading, the Rangers will be making more money because of this TV deal. Yes, they certainly will. They'll be making a lot more money according to their own calculations, but we'll have to see how many more deals they ultimately agree to. This is still a work in progress for the Rangers. They're still talking to Fubo and Hulu. Those were the two that were mentioned today. They're talking with Dish and a few other providers as well. YouTube TV is another one. But they're going to have the offering on Victory Plus. They're going to be on Spectrum, AT&T Uverse, DirecTV Stream. They're going to have an over-the-air option as far as satellite. They're going to have several states of which to use as well. Their territory is huge. You're talking Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma, parts of Kansas, and New Mexico as well. Just a huge territory of fans from which to utilize. And we'll see how much money it ultimately brings them. The Rangers TV deal has not worked out quite as well as they had hoped when they signed it all those years ago with the former Bally Sports or Diamond Sports Group. Ultimately, I think this situation is going to work out better both this year for how much money they'll be bringing in and for the years going forward as well. Vlady, $40 million a year would be better, in my opinion, than a combo of Gray, Jock, Berger extension. Let's just say you bring in a couple of guys in free agency next year. Just off the top of my head, trying to think who's a free agent next year. Framber Valdez, say he's around $30 million. That's one. Then you bring in another guy around $10 million. Trying to think who would be worth 10 next year. I don't think he's worth 10, but he might sign for 10 if you give him a length. Say you get a Jake Cronenworth type of a deal to Luis Arraez, I think he might take that type of a deal, because I think right now the Padres are offering him something like 3 years at $35 million. If you double that offer, maybe you get Luis Arraez out of that deal, and then you bring in Framber Valdez and Luis Arraez, to your lineup and to your rotation for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Would you rather have Framber Valdez in your rotation or a pitcher of his caliber, a Dylan Cease, somebody in that range, a $30 million starting pitcher, which is where I think they're going to spend their money, and bring in a guy like Luis Arraez? Or would you rather have Vlady? I think it'd be very close, but for me, I'd rather have the starting pitcher because I think that's the bigger impact to the Rangers as to what they have. I think their lineup is going to be good enough. I think those pieces have to continue to improve, though. Big question, big year for Jonah Heim this year, and also for Josh Young. Evan Carter to a lesser extent, because this, in all intents and purposes, is going to be his rookie year, since he didn't get to play much at all last year and only played in September the year before. Even with that postseason run that he had, very little time at the major league level so far. So this year essentially be working as a rookie year for him. But big year, big time for the Rangers' young guys on this roster as well. Jock has 2 more years and Berger has 4. But again, there are opt-outs on that deal as well. To be honest, preferred Kyle Tucker, Vlady, not a player, okay. Well, I mean, I think it's closer than what you think anyway. So for me, I think they're going to try to go the free agency route with starting pitching once again. Molly's going to be a free agent. Gray's going to be a free agent. They still have DeGrom in there. They still have Eovaldi. And if one of those guys starts to show a little bit age, the worry there is Eovaldi for me. If DeGrom doesn't show that he can be healthy, rotation is where they're going to spend the money. Let's see here, Willard. Can you imagine the 23 deadline of the Astros had traded for Cease and Roberts Jr. and Snell and Hader? I promise you the Rangers wouldn't have beat the Astros. Well, again, revisionist history. I mean, the Rangers ultimately did win, but as far as getting those pieces, I never thought the Astros had the pieces to trade for those guys. I mean, their prospect system was pretty much shot already, and they spent the rest of it to bring in Verlander. Obviously, it didn't work out as well as they had hoped. They didn't win a World Series out of it, and now he's on, probably in his final year of his career, to the San Francisco Giants. Let's see here. Willard, instead of Jake Myers, your Texas Rangers would have been facing Robert Jr., along with Altuve, Bregman, and Alvarez, and Tucker, and Diaz in 23 playoffs. It's over? I wouldn't say that. The Rangers still won. I mean, even with as good a lineup as they had. But to me, Robert Jr. hasn't been healthy enough, and the Rangers have actually played pretty well against Robert Jr. as well. Now, do I think that those pieces would have helped the Astros? Absolutely. But I don't think they would have had them to begin with. I don't think they had the prospects to get it done here. I'm aware that they do. I'm just saying that as in compared to Vlady. I mean, I do like Vlady. I would love to have him on the team. I'm not going to argue against it. But I'm just saying the way I think it's going to go, more realistically, is the Rangers are going to spend in free agency on the starting pitcher. And if by some miracle they're able to come up with enough money to still add another impact bat, like a Kyle Tucker or Vladimir Guerrero Jr., I would love to have both options. Have my cake and eat it too. But I think we're probably talking about, say, $40, $50 million that the Rangers might have to spend next year. They're going to spend roughly $30 million on an elite starting pitcher. That leaves roughly $20 to spend on another spot. I don't think they'll have the money for Vladdy unless they, trade somebody off of this roster. But as it stands, $40 to $50 million. They're going to spend it on starting pitching first. As much as I would like to have one of those guys, I just don't think it's very likely. Willard Garcia. Doley certainly is. By the way, tell me what he did do last season. Well, he was injured from basically May on. But the entire Rangers team didn't do much last year either offensively. Gray and Jock combined for $30 million, which is why I was saying Vladdy over the two of them. I get that. I got you. I'm so well there. Definitely have the money to sign Vlad, but with Young as GM prioritize pitching, absolutely. And what's been the difference with Chris Young as the GM of this team versus John Daniels versus Nolan Ryan versus anybody else prior to him? He continues to get pitching, more pitching, and more pitching. We saw that the year they won the World Series. They bring in more starting pitching. Remember in the offseason, they said, hey, we got to go out there and get this big guy in Jacob deGrom. They get that deal done. Then they see an opportunity on the market. He goes to the owner, Ray Davis, and convinces him to spend the extra money on Nathan Eovaldi. They see things not working out in that starting rotation. What do? They trade for Max Scherzer. Hey, we added another guy to our rotation. We're done with starting pitching, right? No, they add Jordan Montgomery, and oh, by the way, in that same trade, they got Chris Stratton, who also had time with Bruce Bochy, had some time in the rotation as well. But the Rangers used him primarily out of the bullpen, but he was also a guy they could have used as a starter. So again, pitching, 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 and more pitching. What do we see this offseason? Rangers are trying to overhaul that bullpen. They've added 5 new faces to that bullpen and likely will add a 6th as a closer. So the Rangers, again, my expectation is the Rangers will continue to address pitching more than anything else as long as Chris Young is the GM there. I have 0 expectations we sign him, but I think it'd just be a good power bat for us to have. I will say having his power in the lineup would absolutely be what the doctor ordered for the Rangers. I mean, that was what the Rangers have really identified this year that they're trying to bring in with Jake Berger, with Jock Peterson, with Higashioka. They targeted power more than anything else. Vlady does bring some of that. I don't think Pete Alonso was ever in the cards financially. I don't think he fits the long-term outlook of what the Rangers are looking to do either, but at least he fits the mold of power. That would be the only case that I would have made to say that the Rangers would be in on a player like that. But I don't think that he's well-rounded enough of a player for them to invest that type of money. So they go the shorter-term route with Jock Peterson, bring him in. They get the cheap contract of Jake Berger in there, still pre-arb. Higashioka, less than $10 million, kind of split time with Jonah Heim behind the plate. I forget what he got. Was it $6, $7, $8 million, something like that? But we'll see what he does for the Rangers. But the Rangers identified power, and so for your point there about Vlady bringing the power, I could see that being part of the reason why Chris Young would go for it at that point. Do you think we go after Framber? Probably not. I think they would go after other starting pitchers next year. I think there's plenty of them to go after. Framber, I think, is too emotional for me to be a number 1 at the head of my rotation. It's tough to kind of steal a guy away, but it would be stealing away from a division rival, so at least Houston wouldn't have him. But for me, I'd rather go with somebody a little bit more stable emotionally on the mound. To me, he reminds me a lot of Martin Perez on the mound. Martin Perez, one of my favorite pitchers, but he never really got the mentality right for the first 6, 7, 8 years of his career. He kind of figured it out towards the back half, but only had like 1 or 2 good years left in him. Still got signed with the White Sox. I'm hoping he does great this year, but he reminds me too much of Martin Perez and the youthfulness Martin had, the issues that he had at that time. Let's see here. Got quite a few comments rolling in. Willard, asked this question: how long did the Rangers take to win? Years, and like the Marlins' career season, everyone then the following season, nothing. The Marlins completely dismantled their team. They completely went into the tank the years after they won. This is not apples and apples that you're comparing there, Willard. You're talking apples and Pluto. I mean, the Marlins were not trying to win the following year. The Rangers, meanwhile, still kept the team together primarily. Their offense did not perform very well. Their injuries in the rotation to start the year got better, but the rotation wasn't necessarily the problem even with the injuries. The offense was what regressed more than anything else, and we'll see if the offensive additions that they've made and the changes that they made to their own players are going to be enough to get Rangers back going in the right direction offensively. Let's see here. Yes, but JD did build the World Series team. He deserves some credit. Absolutely, I'm right there with you. JD gets a bad rap anyway from Rangers fans. He deserves hats off for the work he did at the time. Rangers, were never more relevant than under John Daniels anyway. Yeah, your JD mixed me up with JD Martinez anyway. But John Daniels deserves a lot of credit for getting this team to a World Series. They didn't sniff one before this. The best teams that the Rangers had before this were in the late 90s that bounced in the first round because they were all offense at that time against the Yankees. I think pretty much anybody who ran into the Yankees at that time would have lost, but the Rangers unfortunately just drew them in the first round every year and didn't work out so well. But John Daniels deserves a lot of credit for getting them as far as they did. Rafe, Rangers always had coaching or management problems. Bad season, then giving up quickly. Now look at the good staff, see why is good, and Davis is willing to spend. Agree. Willard, Garcia is not the Astros dad because one season doesn't make him Astros daddy more than one season. He still did some of those same heroics this year as well, Willard. Let's see here. He does have a way of getting underneath the entire fan base, the team, Framber Valdez specifically as well. Marcus Semien seems to get under his skin as well, so good rivalry there between Houston and Texas. Lucas, you know what Pete Alonso does fit? The polar bear in Arlington meme? Yes, he does. We're signing Dylan Cease. Lockett? I hope not, because again, the volatility is just too much for me. Would he still be an improvement for this rotation? Yes. But I still would be looking for more consistency as far as a starting pitcher. And we'll see who they ultimately get, but they will add somebody. Rafe, who do you think is a better pitcher today? Randy Johnson, Nolan Ryan. Uh, if they were to be in the game today, I would still probably go Randy, just because of his overpowering dominance on the mound. I think Ryan was more of a strikeout artist as well as Randy, but I think the height of Randy Johnson, the extension that he had, I think would still play in today's game. Now, overall, if I had to pick one of the two, I think Randy was just a better pitcher, honestly. Nolan Ryan was still a very good pitcher. We're talking splitting hairs here, but to me, Randy is in the top 5 of my favorite all-time pitchers in the game. Nolan Ryan's in my top 10. Still a very good pitcher, but I have Randy just a little bit ahead. Rafe, I don't mean competing in MLB, just overall pitching challenge. Again, Randy just a little bit above. Randy in my top 5, Ryan in my top 10. If Rangers trade for Monty, what would Diamondbacks have to take from his contract to make that work? They'd have to take about $15 million of his $22.7 left. So the Rangers would be eating about $7 million of that. A trade return would likely be a guy like Ezekiel Duran, and maybe a lower level prospect would get the deal done. Kind of decrease, or takes the clutter out of that roster right now for the Rangers. They've got like 5 middle infielders besides Seager, besides Simeon, that they're going to try to shoehorn into this lineup. Duran, Foscue, Smith, Ornelas, and then there's another guy in the minors that they're looking at as well. But they've got several guys that they can use in that utility role. They can use to lose one of those guys to bring in another innings eating starter like Jordan Montgomery. What's Cease going to finish bringing in next season? 20-ish. I think Cease is going to get 30 something. We shall see. You're definitely tired with that. We'll see. But to me, let's see. I still like Randy Johnson. His extension, the dominance on the mound. I get, everybody in the Rangers country loves what Nolan Ryan really brought. I mean, that ferocious, competitive nature on the mound. Randy is the same kind of a thing, but to me, I think Randy had more. He had more to work with. I'll put it that way. To me, Nolan was still a very prolific pitcher. He had a lot to work with as well, but I just prefer Randy over him, honestly. Let's see here. If we trade for Monty, we would have to trade starters away, right? No, we wouldn't. I mean, even if we kept John Gray, we wouldn't have to trade him away because we bring in Jordan Montgomery. They need people to eat innings in that rotation. All right. It's after midnight here, Central Time. I want to thank all you guys for joining us tonight. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe. If you guys are new here, hit that like, subscribe, follow us on X @UpsideSN, and on Facebook, Upside Sports Network. Your headlines of the day: Haseong Kim goes to the Rays, 2 years, $29 million, opt out after the first year. Reds trade for Taylor Rogers from the Giants, I believe. We saw the Jays become the strong favorites now for Max Scherzer. Estevez goes to the Royals. Canely goes to the Tigers as well. And the Guardians are still looking for a center fielder, and Alonso, Cohen, and Boris continue to have their war of words in the media as well. So hopefully we get a deal by the end of the weekend anyway with Alex Bregman. That's the one biggest domino I'm looking at. Alonso, I think, will sign sometime thereafter, but those are the two big dominoes there as well. Appreciate all you guys joining us tonight. Hit that like, subscribe, hit the hearts in the chat. Really does help us out when you interact with our channel. And just want to thank all of you guys for making this so much fun. Mark, thank you for your kind words that you sent me earlier. Really does mean a lot to us, the way you guys interact and support our channel. So thank you guys for joining us. You guys have a great night. We'll see you guys tomorrow.